For more, Ivan Eland joins us now from Washington, D.C. He's a senior fellow and director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute. Really good to have you back with us, Ivan. Can I start with Putin's visit to Belarus? As we heard there are growing fears that perhaps Belarus could be dragged into the conflict in Ukraine. We know the country was used as a staging ground for Russia ahead of its invasion of Ukraine back in February. Are you worried that perhaps Minsk could be another more direct player in the conflict?
Well, it certainly could be, but it could also be a ruse to get the Ukrainians to shift forces to the north, because the Ukrainians lately have been besting the Russians in the south near Kherson and places near the river there. So I think it's possible, and I think there are a few thousand Russian troops in Belarus, so it's possible. I think Lukashenko really would like to avoid active participation in the war. It's one thing to train and threaten to come in and have his pilots trained, certainly, and also to act as a staging area for any Russian forces. But I think he's really reluctant to get into the conflict with his own forces.
Meanwhile, we're seeing the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, come under increasing attack. Overnight, we saw some 35 so-called kamikaze drones being deployed there, hitting critical infrastructure. Is it a possibility that perhaps Kiev might fall to the Russians, or do you believe that Vladimir Zelensky's forces are prepared for that eventuality and will do everything they can to prevent it?
Well, originally Putin said he was, drafting 300,000 troops, and about 100,000, it's estimated, are already in the fight. So he'd have 200,000 left. But these forces are just awful. They're not trained. They're not well equipped or anything else. So I mean, he could marshal some forces up in the north. But I think in this day and age, you need many things for warfare, and oftentimes a small, agile force can hold off a much bigger force, especially of draftees who don't want to be there, who are ill-trained, ill-equipped, not enough winter clothing, etc. So I think this idea that they're going to get it with mass. The Russians have used mass infantry attacks before, but it could just be, if they do attack Kyiv in the north, I think the Ukrainians will send even more forces up there to stop it. But I don't foresee that Russia being successful in that, even if they tried it.
And at his annual end-of-year press conference, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres struck a pessimistic tone, saying that he believes that the conflict in Ukraine will continue to go on, and he doesn't see the prospect for peace talks on the horizon. It really is quite sobering to hear that coming from the world's top diplomat. What will it take, do you think, for the parties to come together to restart negotiations?
Well, usually in warfare, either one side's winning and the other side's losing in a big way, like collapsing, or you have a stalemate and the two sides are just exhausted. And I don't think that's the case right now. The Ukrainians have seen success, and they want to liberate the rest of their country if they can, even if that's not, really at this point a short-term objective that they can fulfill. And Russia, I think Putin is dogged and determining to get some face-saving way of having some success. So what he's trying to do is a very smart strategy. He's making the population of Ukraine more determined by hitting civilian targets of water, electricity, heat, that sort of thing. And it never pays to attack civilians. Many militaries do it, but it doesn't. It just enrages both the military and the citizenry to fight harder. And I think that's what's going to happen in Ukraine. But Putin is going to try that because he's desperate to get some. He's desperate to avoid falling at home simply because he's losing the war in Ukraine.
Okay, Ivan Eland, we will have to leave it there, but it's great to get your analysis as always. Thank you.